Do you want to? Thank you. Welcome to the March 10th Eugene Police Department Police Commission. And I know we have a pretty filled agenda, but I'd like for us to start with doing a, what comes up first, Holly?
Sorry, we are going to review the agenda, and then after that, we'll do a previous meeting recap, and then public comment.
Okay, so let's go ahead and I pulled up the MLB thing because the chief let me know about that. So my apologies. My mind strays. Let's go ahead and review the past month's meeting, and if we can have a little bit of movement on that as well.
So Vice Chair Mogart, did you want to go over that, or?
Yeah, I'm trying to find it here. Let's see.
Yeah. Last month we had a visitors presentation from the 4J Public School, this school safety program with Carrie Skinner and her team.
Okay.
And then we just had our normal meeting. Our other presenter wasn't able to make it.
That's correct. Okay. Oof. I'm lost with finding my agenda here. My apologies.
For this evening?
Yes.
Okay, so so I can email that to you, but real quick, after our agenda review, we'll have a previous meeting recap, which we're doing right now, and then we'll have public comment, followed by liaison reports, and then commissioner comments, the chief's report, and then we have a presenter this evening, Dr. Johnny Lake, and he'll be doing a diversity, equity, and inclusion presentation.
Okay.
And I'll email you that agenda right now.
Okay, thank you.
It looks like we do have one individual that's in the attendee. I don't know if he is wanting to speak. His name's Jeff, and I can allow him to talk if we would like to do public comment. Jeff, would you like to make a public comment? We'll give him a few minutes here.
Sorry, I was muted and then not muted. Okay, so well, let's finalize the first portion of our agenda here. Is there any other questions or concerns or corrections needed for the agenda from last month? Doesn't appear so. So could we please have a motion to approve the agenda? The current agenda, my apologies.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. I don't think we have any conversation around it, so let's go ahead and take a vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand or say aye. Wonderful. Okay, so it looks like it's passed. Let's go ahead and you did give a sort of brief recap of the last meeting, so I don't know that there's much for us to discuss on that side. Are there any questions or concerns about the last meeting's recap? No? All right, could we get a motion, please? Is there a motion needed to approve the previous meeting's minutes?
So moved. Second.
Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, so public comment. We did have one participant, as mentioned by Holly. Is that person wanting to have a moment to give public comment?
It doesn't appear so.
Okay, wonderful. Let's go ahead and move on then. Liaison reports. Can we start with our liaison to the CRB? Would you mind beginning this off, Dr. Michael Hames Garcia?
Absolutely. So the CRB heard a review or reviewed an investigation this week, this month, into, I think it was originally classified as a courtesy complaint that then turned into a search and seizure review. The main thing that came out of it that was relevant for this body was actually something that has been an ongoing concern of many members of the board, which has to do with the practice of officers turning off or muting their body-worn video for tactical reasons in the field. And this is allowed under current policy, but I don't want to say that it happens a lot, because obviously the only cases that come to my attention are those that the CRB reviews. But in my 3 years on the CRB and other people who've been on it longer, we have seen cases where officers will mute their body-worn video for tactical and say that it's for tactical reasons. But another officer will either show up or will be on the scene who doesn't mute, and so we watch the body-worn video from that officer, and it's clear that there was no tactical reason. In other cases, like the case that we were looking at this month, they'll say it's for tactical reasons, but then it's just very unclear that there is tactical reasons. That doesn't appear to be what they're doing. And so it seems that, at least in many cases that come before the board, that officers are almost kind of wink and nod. We know that the only reason we can mute the body-worn video is for tactical reasons, so we're going to say it's for tactical reasons, then mute the body-worn video. And as I said, over the course of my 3 years, it's happened frequently enough that in my opinion, speaking as myself and not on behalf of the board, it seems to impede investigations into complaints. If crucial parts of the body-worn video are missing regularly, and there doesn't appear to be a legitimate reason. So one of the things that came up during the meeting was other possible solutions the city and the department might have to this. So if like perhaps when there's a need for body-worn video to be reviewed by people outside of the department, someone in the department might be hired in the department or assigned to redact the audio for tactical reasons, rather than having that be a decision that's made in the field by officers. It's just the sense among, I would say, all of the board, but I'm not entirely sure of that, is that this is impeding investigations. And yeah, it's been frequent enough that the board is prepared to write its own memo to the chief about this issue, in the hopes that some resolution might happen. But we're not going to do that yet, because the thinking was, as liaison, I would bring this first here and sort of hope that we might have some kind of resolution of the problem.
So just the video and not the video audio?
It's just the audio, yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Hames Garcia. And we do have the representative for the Human Rights Commission here. If you would be willing to give us a liaison report, please, Mr. Scott Lemons.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair. So we just had one thing to report out of the Human Rights Commission that's germane to the Police Commission. And that's that there's been a lot of bias incidents going on, and specifically anti-Semitic flyers are being put up in neighborhoods around Jewish temples. It is currently, they haven't broken laws yet because it's covered under the First Amendment, but it's still concerning and we are keeping an eye on it. Thank you.
Do you mind me asking what kind of response or what kind of monitoring is taking place with that? Because it was in my neighborhood.
Yeah, so the police are actively investigating it from what the report was out from the police, but since it's not rising to a crime yet, they aren't able to like really allocate resources to figure out what's going on.
And this is the incident with the almonds that were placed in the bag to be a weight?
I don't recall that being, but this was 3.5 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Somebody made a remark that almonds were used to produce the gas that was used in the gas chamber. So that might have been a reference to the reason why they used almonds in these particular leaflets. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll bring that back to the Human Rights Commission. I appreciate that.
Okay. And we do have Councillor Ye and Councillor Zelenka. Would you be willing to give a brief report if you need, if you want? You don't have to.
Yeah, thanks. That's a very good question. I'm losing track of what we reported on last month and if there's something new to report or if I already said it. So maybe I'm going to get Alan to help. I don't, oh, he's walking away. So I'll just try. Well, oh, he's back. Okay. We met at council and talked about the recommendations from the Ad Hoc Committee, but did I report that last month? Does anybody remember?
It sounds familiar.
recall that.
Okay,
Conversation
okay,
about
good.
the
Oh,
I think
report.
I did. So I don't think there's anything. Alan, you got something?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
You know, we did meet and we authorized the city manager to go back and do some more work and look at the IGR things, kind of figure them out a little bit more, but also work on working through the list a little bit more.
Yeah, we're anticipating something's going to come to the police commission, but that's not determined yet. So
Ooh.
Yeah, actually,
we did let them know
fell.
that you guys left space in your work plan, which they should all know, but we reminded them. So
Yeah, I don't recall exactly which ones they were, Jennifer, maybe, but there were several of them that actually were policy issues that were probably going to come to the police commission for
my
discussion.
understanding is that staff is going to reach out to our chair and vice chair at some point to discuss that more, you know, for scheduling and whatnot. So
Wonderful.
yeah, if
Sounds
that
good.
doesn't happen, you can let Alan and I know and we can check up.
Sounds good. I'm a little invested in it since I was on the ad hoc. So, well, thank you very much. I appreciate the report. I believe that's it for the liaison reports. So let's go ahead and move on to commissioner comments. And I am seeing a Brady Bunch type thing here. Let me go ahead and start with the person that's on my immediate left. Let's see. So Commissioner Shivers, would you willing to give us a few comments?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
I can.
Excellent. So in response to Michael's liaison report, I have some questions about if they're muting for non-tactical reasons, that sounds like a violation of policy that they can then face disciplinary action for. If that, I'm seeing a shake no of the head, which is unfortunate. If that's not the case, if the policy and the policy manual is just ignored that way, it would be unfortunate to, take away legitimate tools. But if, if it's not being heeded, then obviously something needs to be done. So thank you for your report, Michael. It's not the first time I've heard it, but I just assumed that if it said, hey, you can do it for this reason, that implied you can't do it if it's not for that reason. But I guess we need to tighten that up a little bit.
Thank you, Commissioner Shivers. The next person I have is Commissioner Michael Hames Garcia.
Oh, I think that's all I had was my liaison report. My understanding of the policy is that it's not like a severe enough, like kind of, it's not, I don't know. The auditor would probably have a better sense than I do of where that policy fits in relation to other kinds of policies and how serious it is. We just not followed it.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Scott Lemons.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I will definitely have more to say in future meetings, as this is my first one, but it is quite concerning to hear that EPD is muting their mics outside of tactical reasons. I've seen that happen in other jurisdictions, and I'm very surprised that it's happening here in Eugene. And I will leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bonnie Dominguez.
So let's see here. So, I got an email from Beatrice, and so we will be airing a general commission introduction to the Spanish speaking community on Monday. I believe this Monday, if I'm not mistaken. So that's exciting. And then additionally, this month, I finished reading a book called The Thin Blue Lie. It's interesting. It's all about technology and like its uses in the police. And I think the name of the book sounds like very provocative or whatever, but it's actually like, it's not actually, too aggressive towards the police. It actually kind of sides, and it's pretty fair. So anyway, so I will be writing a report on that for you all because I think it's very interesting. It talks about a couple of interesting points, specifically with regard to how police, like different police departments have written or have had contracts written with companies that provide technology, and then for some reason, those contracts seem to make it so that like you can omit who you're partnering with or something like that. I have to write up my report, but anyway, it's interesting. So look out for that hopefully next month. So anyway, that's all.
Thank you, Commissioner. Do you know if that's available at our local library?
Yes, it is. I will be returning the book soon. So yes, yes. Once my report's done. So please don't recall it yet.
Hold.
No. Yes, put it on hold, but don't recall it yet.
Okay, will do. Thank you. And Commissioner Ian Winbrook.
Evening all. Apologies for having to come in on my cell phone. I was driving late from work. Just wanted to extend gratitude from our business community, fellow board members of the Whitaker Community Council, to Chief Skinner, who hopped on last night to be part of the conversation we had with Assistant City Manager Christy Hammett, as well as Director of Public Works, Matt Rodriguez, about public safety in the Whitaker and the demobilization of Washington Jefferson Park, the transition of our residents to safe sleep sites, as well as potential opportunities for park rehabilitation and use of ARPA funds, as well as other grant funds on the park. Really appreciated Chief's presence there and his continued presence to the community. It makes a big difference when our community members get to interact with all members of law enforcement, but particularly the accessibility that you've had to Thea Lee, our liaison to EPD, as well as our business community, means a lot to me and means a lot to us. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And am I missing anyone? Doesn't appear that we have anybody else has joined. So let's go ahead and move on to the next portion of our agenda. And that is the Chief's report.
Perfect. Hey, good seeing everybody. We're dangerously close to thinking about no masks and whether or not we want to be in the same room together. I understand that that's maybe not the most comfortable scenario. So I think be awesome if we could think about a hybrid so that we could accommodate everybody's needs. But I know that many of us are excited about this weekend and being able to get back to another sense of normalcy. Let me pick off a couple things because I love listening to your comments because it kind of shapes my report a little bit. I had some stuff that I was ready to talk about, but then you guys always tee me up nicely with some stuff that I want to cover. Let's talk about body worn camera muting. Anytime we do it, it's an issue, obviously. So I'm not going to say it's not an issue. I think as a matter of context, I think we need to understand, or I'd like you to remember that we store hundreds of thousands of hours of body cam footage every single year. In the instances of muting, for whatever reason, is a fraction of that. When you think about what goes to the CRB, those are kind of handpicked, and some of those actually do have some muting issues with them for sure. But over the course of the year, when we're looking into 450 different incidents, whether it's a service complaint all the way up to an internal affairs investigation, it actually doesn't come up very often. However, what I will tell you is that I've been in negotiations with the union to eliminate the tactical excuse for muting out of our body cam footage. So I'll tell you where I'm going with this thing is I'm going to basically say you can't mute your body cam for any reason, with the exception of two. Number one is attorney-client privilege. If you're talking to an attorney and your body cam is on, not recording that is going to be allowable. In talking with some of the attorneys that we deal with, whether it's the district attorney or the judges we talk to, oftentimes they're really concerned that we might miss something in the redaction period that could be really critical. And so I'm going to allow for that. The only other allowable muting is going to be if you're able to specifically articulate that you as a supervisor or an FTO are giving corrective action to your employee under the premise of private personnel conversations. And I think that'll be really obvious. So if somebody decides they're going to try and use that as an excuse and then mute, I think it'll be really obvious whether they were going down that path or not. Unlike the tactical thing, which it really is a huge gray area, and there's a lot of wiggle room to talk about what was tactical, what wasn't, what was said, what wasn't. And so I'm just going to get rid of it. And so we're working with the union on what that looks like. So it'll tighten that up a ton. And I think it's good for investigations. And it's really actually good for the officers, because I think we'll see fewer officers having to deal with allegations. And those allegations would not be allegations of serious misconduct, which is defined by ordinance as egregious and disparate. This would be more of a minor misconduct of just being a performance issue. And so, it gets them out of harm's way too. So I think it's a win-win personally. So just know that that's in the works right now. I've already had, Julie's done a great job. We've already had one full draft already drafted, and we're getting feedback from the union on that because it is a change in working practice. We have to bargain that. And so that's why we're doing that. So I think I'm hoping that feels good for you guys as policymakers to know that I'm paying attention and that we're trying to do something different around muting the body cams. So that'll be happening. The bias incidents we do take serious, right, Scott? Many bias incidents don't necessarily rise to the level of crimes, but remember, our special investigation unit specifically has liaisons as detectives that work with the different communities that are impacted, whether they're crimes or not. And so our detectives constantly are gathering intelligence, they're gathering those flyers, they're scrubbing social media and doing some pretty sneaky social media types of investigative work to try and connect the dots and figure out where that's coming from, so we can at least keep track of groups that are maybe engaged in hate and bias incidents so that they don't become crimes and they don't become those types of things. And the Jewish community is one that we are connected with a ton. It's not uncommon for me and Margot Helpan to talk anytime something's coming up that they have some concerns with. So we take those serious, and SIU is the ones that take that on. And those guys and gals are super skilled at that. The other thing that I was going to do, Silver kind of stole my thunder because he started the conversation with me. But for those of you that didn't hear, we're in the middle of a hiring process. Seems like that we're always in the middle of a hiring process. but our officer hiring process right now will close on March 22nd. And we're in the middle of a CSO hiring process for that alternative response. We're hiring a bunch of CSOs. Right now for our officer hiring process, we have almost 70 applicants, which is more applicants than we've had in a long time. And we still have 12 days to go. So we're really, really hopeful. I think the really exciting piece of that is I got a report just today from our Employee Resource Center that using the census data as a benchmark. So just to qualify that, we are at almost 10% of those applicants are Black or African-American, and 16% of those are Hispanic or Latino. We're lagging behind in our Asian recruitment. And then we have Polynesian and American Indian both in that recruitment. And so I'm really pleased with the numbers that I'm seeing out of our officer recruitment, higher than we've seen in a long time, and excited to see who makes it through that process. Our CSO recruitment is, we've got 36 so far that have applied for those positions. 2% of those.
How many positions is that?
We're going to hire, it'll be
how many?
13. We'll hire, well, if we get supervisors, if we get our supervisors out of our existing CSOs, then it'll be a total of 13 new faces. 2% of those are Black or African-American. Almost 20% are Hispanic or Latino for CSO, and 7% are of Asian descent. And then we have American Indian in there. And it's probably not going to shock you that our gender recruitment in police officer is mostly male, but our CSO is almost 50-50, male and female. So the recruiting team is doing an amazing job getting people to at least apply for the jobs. Now we have a couple of different steps. We have testing, we have the physical for police officers. When I say physical, it's not like going to the doctor. It's like a little mini obstacle course with job related tasks, those types of things. And we get them through that, and then we'll be on to interviews. But so far, really, really encouraged with the numbers, really pleased with our diversity in those numbers. And so I know that this group has been interested in kind of seeing how that goes and how we can better, kind of fill the pipeline with a variety of people that better represent our community. And so I'm really, really excited about what I see so far. So let me stop there. Let me see if there's any questions maybe you guys have. And I know we always kind of have a few questions after I talk.
Thank you so much, Chief. Any questions that we have so far? Doesn't look like there are any. I had a brief question.
Actually, Sulphur, we had council put up
hands. I didn't see them. All right, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Commissioner Winbrook.
No, it wasn't me. It was Councilmember Ye who had their hand up first.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry, Councilor Ye.
We can fight over who goes first. So, Chief, I was just hoping, I assume folks, first of all, would self-select which group they feel more comfortable applying for. But I'm wondering, really basic, what might be the differences in qualifications that you're looking for the two positions, or is it kind of the same?
That's a great question. I think certainly the police officer process has many more stops and a lot more disqualifiers, if you will. The job descriptions go out for both. The job descriptions are very different. The basic qualifications are actually very, very similar as far as education or age or any of those things. So those are really similar. I think what we did this time is we put out a lot. We spent a lot of, that $150,000 that you gave us for recruitment. This is what we're getting for this. Is we're actually reaching down into California, up into Portland. We're on the radio. We're on TV. We're sending people to places. We're having people come visit us. We're connecting on Spanish radio like we've never been able to do before, or at least afford to be able to do before. And I think we're starting to see the fruits of that, at least the numbers suggest that. But I think the biggest issue is that we've done a really good job of articulating the differences in the two jobs, and people are finding themselves really drawn to one or the other. And what we'll find is the CSO group, I think there's a real desire to kind of dip their toe in the water a little bit, because we talk about being able to do investigations and be in the community and connect with people and help solve problems and assist patrol. And I think there's a lot of people that maybe aren't quite sure whether or not they want to be a police officer, but this is like the perfect way to kind of, like I said, dip your toe in the water. And so the CSO group, as much as I don't want the turnover in that group, I have a sneaky suspicion our CSO group might actually feed our patrol numbers into the future. It might be a breeding ground for people that spend a couple of years as a CSO, get really good at that, and then decide maybe patrol or being a law enforcement professional is something they want to do. And so we'll kind of see how that plays out.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chief. And then we had Commissioner Winbrook.
Yeah, thank you so much for the update, Chief. Really excited to see a ton of folks excited to potentially join EPD and be a part of the culture that y'all have been co-creating since you joined. My question is one I feel like I already know the answer to, but I wanted to ask it anyway. I hope that you know just how many Whitaker residents and business owners are really excited at the prospect of having more beat police officers on the street that they can continue to develop relationships with, as well as just police officers that they can see in their vehicles as well. I think you heard that last night, but I just wanted to make sure that you knew just how many folks in our community are really eager to have a degree of sense of a safety, knowing that we have more officers potentially coming to our neighborhood to develop relationships with community members. And so they can have that visibility and that relationship with EPD.
Yeah, we would like nothing more than to do that. Trust me. I mean, and some of the comments that, for those of you that weren't there, obviously most of you weren't there last night, some of the comments that come out of that are as simple as saying, well, why don't you guys just drive around more and just be seen? Or why don't you just, spend more time in the Whitaker and drive around, and when you see stuff, stop. They want more proactive policing. Proactive policing comes from undedicated time. And statistically, here's a great way to think about it. Statistically, anytime you see a police car in our community, any given hour, so in that 60-minute span, there is a 90% chance that that officer is going from one call to another. Only 10% of every hour is for an officer is spent without anything to do. And so we need to expand that. We want more time where officers actually have the ability to be in neighborhoods, driving around, stopping and talking to people, doing those types of things. So it seems like a perfect solution just to have us drive around and be able to do more proactive policing. And unfortunately, the supply and demand equation only allows us to do that 6 minutes out of every hour. So we're working on it. So I appreciate the comments, but just know that we're working on it.
Thank you. And Commissioner James Garcia.
Yeah, this probably goes without saying, but I just, I'm sure that you track pay inequality in the department. I'm sure the city does as well. I'm assuming that the CSO positions will be at a lower pay scale than sworn officers, which if women are disproportionately applying for the CSO positions, there's not a lot that can be done about that, but it does mean that there will be probably I would venture a increased gender pay inequality.
Yeah, thank you for that. We're right. It's funny that you brought that up. We're right in the middle of doing our pay equity work right now citywide, and paying attention to that. I think the nuance of the CSOs that maybe people don't know is the CSOs are actually in the same labor group as the police officers. So their wages are all negotiated in the bargaining unit. So while we set kind of the initial band based on what they do, based on the job description and the classification, what they do, we're going through a citywide pay equity look, and especially for our non-reps, which are the city sets those salaries, but we're going to be negotiating a new contract for Eugene Police Employee Association starting this next month. This current contract expires in July. And so pay for CSOs will be front and center in that contract discussion. I can assure you. So, but I appreciate the comments because we are really trying to pay attention to pay equity right now.
I can also confirm that on the union's behalf. It's pretty much front and center.
Yeah, Navasha's got a laundry list of asks that they're going to make. I know that's happening.
Thank you, Chief. Commissioner Shivers. You were muted and now your audio feed is back.
Thank you. I'm double muted myself by accident. So last week we talked about recruitment and retention. I'm really happy that the recruitment team is doing work. I'm super excited about what Bonnie was talking about, introducing, the police commission to more folks in our community. What I was talking about last time was, where a potential problem in the pipeline might be. So, we got good numbers in recruitment. If we have a bunch of folks who drop off at the qualification stage, I will have to have I don't think anybody wants to lower our standards when it comes to our officers. But, my question here is about once they get hired and the retention of officers, which I know talking to some folks from the fire side, I've heard firsthand about how difficult retention can be, especially when you're bringing in folks from who are new to Eugene. And I was wondering what sort of retention we could potentially be looking at. I think the 4J school has or in the past has had a specific team for peer support for Black and Brown teachers. I was wondering if we had anything like that for the police, or if there were any discussions of something like that for us.
It's a great question. And I'll kind of go through this really quickly on the front end because you kind of teed it up for me. All of the numbers that I'm talking about now are basically meet the minimum qualifications. So when they go into the system, we don't wash them. Well, we do wash them for minimum qualifications, but then when I report numbers, that's minimum qualifications. We do lose some. We lose some at every stage. So you sign up to you apply to be a police officer, and then the first place we lose people is when people choose not to show up for testing, and so they just self-select out. We have testing, both written testing and our physical testing, and of course we have a pass no pass on both of those, and you lose some there. And then at every stage you have a tendency to lose some. There's not one stage that we found that is just kind of washing a ton of people. It's just they just kind of filter out and trickle out through those various stages. And then of course the background is one that we end up filtering a lot out just because of some truthfulness issues.
Is there any stage that disproportionately washes out folks of certain backgrounds?
I don't have that information in front of me. The ERC,
let's keep an eye on it for sure.
No, for sure, because I want to make sure that we don't have a part of our selection process that is disparate in that respect. I got to be honest with you, I'm not sure up to this point we've had enough numbers to be able to have a good statistical analysis. Your analysis is only good as your data points, and so we'll pay attention to that. And this is going to be a really good group to see if something reveals itself. As far as the retention piece, I don't think we have anything specific to the police department, but I know the city, as a city employee, the city has really done a nice job of building systems around. We have equity advisors that have been selected throughout the city, and we have some from, until she left employment, she was with EPD, but we have equity advisors around that that we're running things through. The belonging training, I think, is really helpful, that everybody has kind of gone through to better understand a sense of belonging and what that means. But I don't know if we have anything specific. Navashi, do you know of anything? I mean,
We don't. We do have peer support team that's focused on everybody's mental health and being able to check in with them. So they're really helpful. But as far as like for specific backgrounds, none that I'm aware of.
it's a good question though. You know, it's like, it's funny because I just got a text message today. I just didn't know this, but it's a contemporary issue. We've got an officer whose wife is Ukrainian. Her family is stuck in Ukraine right now. Her dad is staying in Kiev to fight. Her grandparents are too old to move, and the mom is staying there to take care of the grandparents. And so the question becomes, we have an EPD officer whose family is our family, and how do we support them from, you know, half a world away? So that's just another example of many of our employees that we need to think about how we get creative on how we support them.
Thank you, Chief. And I had one question, and I think it's going to be the final question here before we do move on. You had mentioned that there was a specific recruitment for the past commercial that was made. What was that specific recruitment, and what kind of recruitment videos are you going to be putting forward in the future?
So the last video is pretty dramatic, you know, and it's not, it didn't go without criticism. We've made a slight adjustment to that. There was a moment in there that was a little bit tone deaf that we learned from. The one thing that I'd like people to remember when we think about marketing and recruiting and outreach is it's not a one size fits all. And so we're in the process of, and have been in the process of, creating several different recruiting videos that showcase different aspects of our organization. The next one that comes out, it's called We Are EPD, and it more showcases the culture and the family atmosphere and the outreach and the community types of things that we do. And so what I just ask people to do is not just get solely focused on some of the dramatic things that we do, the dangerous stuff that we're asked to do, is that we're a well-rounded department, and we want to showcase that.
Do you mind sharing with us what part was, I didn't see anything that might be tone deaf.
So at the very end of our recruitment video, now the PSAs that you see on TV and on radio don't have this because they're shortened. The long recruiting video at the very end had a picture, and there was in the background there was a blue line flag, and we have to be sensitive that that flag means something different to other people than it means to us. For us, it is specifically the blue line for us, which goes back to the 1950s. Signifies that line of protection between chaos and peace within our community. The last 2 years, we've seen that symbolism kind of take on a different approach, depending on who wants to use it for their own personal uses. And so while it's something internally to us that means something, we have to be sensitive that to our partners externally, it can mean something different. So it was a little bit of a tone deaf moment for me. And so we've just adjusted that nanosecond of a video, and I'm going to repost the video because we have some amazing officers in that video that are showcased doing some amazing work. And so we want to make sure people understand that. But I understand that right now we're having to be a little bit careful about our messaging.
Thank you for your openness and honesty about that. There was one particular officer, and she was also posted on a Facebook page. Is that Officer Cardwell?
Kirsten Cardwell. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think one of the moments of that video, if you guys see it, the full video, that, you know, and the videos mean something to different things to different people. They pick up on different things. My favorite part of the video is towards the end when the little girl is kind of looking up with this like sense of admiration of a female police officer. And so there's just some really cool things about that video. Eugene Henderson does a nice job in that video. We're at Autzen, shaking hands and doing the things that we do, and it shows some of the fun stuff that, you know, we think it's fun. Maybe not everybody else thinks it's fun. Some of the fun stuff, and unfortunately some of the dangerous stuff we have to do. But it's well done, and I'm really proud of our employees that participated in that.
Thank you so much, Chief. It looks like Commissioner Dominguez has her hand raised.
just a quick side note. I was looking at the poster that you all made for recruiting for the Citizens Academy. And I don't think it's tone deaf or anything. It's just kind of weird. Like you have, it's like some woman is looking out of her window, like through her blinds or something. And then I guess like a bunch of different scenes of police things, like just a lot of pictures are happening. It's like a collage. And I think it's kind of weird. I don't know,
I'll take a look
maybe,
at it. I don't even know what you're talking about. I'll
well,
have to take
somebody
a look
sent
at
it to me and it just looks so weird. It's just like you open your blinds and then there's just like a bunch of police everywhere. I'm like, what is the message here? I don't know. I feel like it's kind of weird.
I'll take a look at it.
Yeah, it's just, yeah, please do. Thank you.
It sounds
Yeah.
comedic. I'd love to see that.
Well, and we're trying to really
I laughed.
promote it as Eugene Citizens Academy, not just Citizens Academy, just because we understand the concept of being a citizen is not the issue here. It's supposed to be for our Eugene community, and just traditionally Citizens Academy is what it's been called. So we're trying to just change our vernacular a little bit to say Eugene Citizens Academy.
Oh yeah, V had suggested community.
Academy.
I was like, that's really cute. Like, I feel like that makes sense. But anyway, also something to look at. Anyway, thanks.
Thanks for bringing that up.
One final question from Commissioner Winbrock, and then we'll move forward.
Hey, sorry to be so last minute with this, but I just wanted to let you know, Chief, that y'all have a rare opportunity to apply for funding that was set aside by the Oregon State Legislature for House Bill 2204, which is for a pilot restorative justice program. And I know that writing grants take staff time and administering grants take staff time, and that grant contortion, changing programs in order to be competitive for funding is a real thing. And y'all know your strengths and your strategic plan better than I. But I wanted to highlight that this pot of funding is the first time that the Oregon legislature has dedicated a funding stream for restorative justice programs. And it seems like a really unique opportunity if you do have ideas in the hopper or alignment with existing programs to pursue the funds. The most competitive applications are going to be in coordination with community-based organizations. I'm part of a statewide policy advisory group around public health and health equity, and that's the alignment with restorative justice. But yeah, I would be over the moon if I could in any way help y'all think through or maybe explore what a competitive application from EPD might be. The kicker is March the 24th is the application deadline. And as you can imagine, certain legislators have already been kind of talking and back channeling with orgs to kind of set the stage. But yeah, didn't want this opportunity to pass you by in case y'all hadn't looked at it as a competitive opportunity to get some funding towards your programs.
Thank you, Ian. I appreciate the offer, and as always, you're always looking for solutions, and I appreciate that. While you were talking, Nabasha sent me the picture, and Bonnie, I think what we are trying to do, which doesn't always resonate, is we're trying to give you a window into what police work is. So trying to let you look through the window and give you a window into what police
I kind
work
of got
is all
that,
about.
but it's just like, it's so, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
No, so again, it's a great example of where we think we're super crafty, and then it maybe doesn't always resonate so deeply, but understand there's nothing nefarious going on. We're just trying
Oh
to
no,
give
I
you-
didn't think so. I just thought it was very comical. I was like,
Yeah.
that's weird. Okay.
trying to give you a window into what we do.
Okay.
Can you share it, Chief?
Yeah, I'd love to see that.
I don't know.
Share
Wash,
screen.
can you share it? She sent it to me via text.
I'm
We can
gonna
put it.
try. I'm gonna try and put it into the chat. You guys,
Wonderful.
Either put it in the chat, or I'll just. I wonder if I can just show it on my phone.
So we're all gonna laugh during my chair opportunity here.
Oh, you can't see it. It won't get. it won't focus. All right.
It's unusual. It reminds me of my grandmother, though. She was always peeking out the window. Wonderful. Well, we have a guest here with us this evening, and I want to thank you, Dr. Lake, for having joined us. Thank you very much for your report, Chief. And without any further ado, Dr. Lake, I will pass it on to you. You are muted. I'm sorry.
There I am. You can hear me now. Thank you all. thank you for the invitation to come and visit with you a little bit. Time is always our biggest challenge, as you all probably know. There's never enough, no matter what we do. I prepared some things for this conversation, but whenever I see all these bright faces, the PowerPoint always ends up being secondary. Whatever I prepared by myself at my desk ends up being secondary. And so I hope that you recognize this as a dialogue, as an opportunity for us to engage and to learn together, because I don't think any real learning happens unless there's a dialogue. I could sit here and talk and do a presentation and show you slides and PowerPoint and all my research, but the real learning happens when we create the dialogue. So I was grateful for the opportunity to come and talk to you about DEI. You guys probably sick of acronyms as much as I am. So it's really important to understand, what are we talking about when we talk about diversity, when we talk about equity, when we talk about inclusion? Because I find that there's a lot of confusion about all of those terms. In fact, one of the assignments I give, professors have to give assignments. That's how they feel like they're doing their job. So here's your first assignment. I'm going to give you, well, usually I pair you up, but since we have to do this on this system, you're going to work by yourself. Usually I give you a partner so you can kind of talk to each other, but I'm going to give you about 1 minute to define diversity. Go. You can think about it for 1 minute and even write it down if you want to, but define diversity. I'm going to call on you in about a minute, so you better get to work if you're not. We use acronyms in our society, and I tell you that even people who do this work oftentimes lean heavily on an acronym instead of the real representation of the work, because this is really about the work. If you use an acronym, always make sure you know what the behind the acronym work is. Because I think everybody's had a minute. So give me a definition of diversity. Michael, I'll start with you. How you doing?
Well, as you know, professors are the worst students. So I was adjusting the brightness on my screen. But off the cuff, diversity depends on the, it's a conventional definition depending on the values of a given community.
Excellent, thank you. See, Bonnie.
I like to think of it basically as perspective that, I mean, regardless of race or whatever, it's just everybody is brought up one way or another. Everybody's very different and you just bring different perspectives. I like to think of it kind of like a brainstorming session. I think it's best to have just a lot of different people, because somebody will say something, and whether or not something is misinterpreted or not, like even the misinterpretation can come up with like really good ideas. So I think that that's like I guess I'm talking about like the boons of diversity. So anyway, that's the end of that.
Thank you. Ian.
Thanks so much for joining us tonight, Dr. Lake. I think about it from an ecosystem perspective or an ecology perspective. Ecosystems are the most resilient when they have ecological diversity. So to me, diversity is the quality of systems which makes them resilient.
Excellent, thank you. Scott.
Thank you, Dr. Lake. So yeah, within the 1 minute, so I would say including all and excluding nobody, making space for marginalized communities that do not normally get to speak up, and having empathy, understanding, and respect while you're doing so.
Excellent. Julie Smith.
How about the state of being diverse or for having variety?
Okay, nice and succinct. Alan.
A cornucopia of race, culture, and gender in participation.
Nice, thank you. Naivasha. I don't know if I said that correctly.
You actually did. Thank you, Naivasha. I definitely think it's more along the lines of unique characteristics that kind of just each person exhibits based on their own personal experiences in life and what they can bring to the forefront, and all being included in that discussion. And it creates a diverse collective unit.
Counselor Ye.
Yeah, sorry, my first name I just realized isn't there. It's Jennifer. So diversity. So I think of diversity as, you know, what makes us different as individuals. But I often think of it in like, how is that different from inclusion? So for me, it's like who's in the room, and do we have different, whether that's perspectives or backgrounds in the room, represented in the room. So that's what I have to add.
Great, thank you. Sean, how you doing?
I'm doing well, and I appreciate the opportunity to interact with you off of Facebook for once. I feel this is a little unfair. I've had a chance to think while everybody else has been given their answers, but the one I came up with is variations of thought, perspective, background, and traits within a given body or community which coexist benignly.
Excellent. Thank you. Chief Skinner.
I wrote down kind of a celebration of our fantastic differences and being able to actually see those differences in each other, experiences, thoughts, opinions.
Mm-hmm. Good, thank you. Holly.
There we go. Welcome, Dr. Lake.
Thank you.
I look at diversity as embracing all walks of life and allowing everyone a voice and the comfort to share their different perspectives.
Thank you. Very good. Silver.
Different perspective, viewpoints, experiences, life experiences, worldviews, and opinions on different matters.
Thank you. Maisie Davis, where'd you go?
I'm right here. Sorry,
Okay.
child issues.
No problem. You got a definition?
So diversity is, to me, all of the things that make us different, without the highlighting of every single one, because everyone has their own differences.
Okay, very good. I do this because it always works the same as it just did. We all know that diversity is deep, wide, broad, long, complex. And usually I have 2 minutes for two people and they come up with the almost dictionary definitions. So we know that diversity is more than what we end up with. So if I ask about the diversity of the Eugene Police Department, what will they tell me? Will I get the definition you just gave me with 1 minute?
Nope, what you get is some HR answer that has race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation.
Yes, very narrow, very narrow. Now here's the contradiction, that at the same time that we know diversity is wide, large, deep, and long, we get trapped in these conversations about diversity being very limited. And it sets up, I think, the dynamic that makes us all kind of afraid to enter these conversations. I am not from here. I started a class at the university with one statement on the board. I'm not from here. And let's see, who can I pick on? I'll use Coos Bay. Anybody know Coos Bay? Because this happens all the time. Coos Bay. They asked me to come to Coos Bay to train the superintendent and all the principals. And I asked them, what's the first thing you noticed about me when I came in to do this training today? You were tall. You have on a nice suit. We really like your necktie. You're wearing glasses. You're a tall man. You have a nice smile. You look like you're in shape. Nobody said black. I says, how many of you people noticed I was black? Only like 3 or 4 of them raised their hand. And one man actually got offended. He says, I didn't notice you were black. I'm like, look, I've been here 3 days. I hadn't seen anybody black but me. He says, I noticed your shoes. You got on some really nice shoes. And he said, that hat, I really like that hat. I said, are you serious? He says, yes, I'm serious. He was kind of offended. I says, come on, man. I said, let me give you a counter example. I'm going to take you to Tennessee to the town I grew up in where everybody was black. And I said, you and I are going to walk down the street. And I said, by the way, I'm going to get you some nice shoes. I'm going to get you a nice hat. I said, people will ask me about you, but what are they going to ask? Who's the man with the nice hat? Or who's the man with the nice shoes? And so what we have going on here a lot of times is not honest conversations about the real issues of diversity. We get trapped in these very narrow conversations about diversity and probably can't get to equity and inclusion because we don't get past these barriers that historically have been passed on to each one of us. I have children as young as middle school who says that their parents tell them, don't mention a person's race because it's rude to mention a person's race. I'm in the grocery store pushing a basket. Woman coming toward me almost as tall as I am. White woman. And she has a little girl with her, look like she's about 4. And I don't know how, but that woman never looked at me. She moved to one side, I moved to one side, and she worked her way by me and never looked at me. But her little girl didn't make it. She did see me. She saw me so surely she stopped, looked at me, said, why are you black? Now mom heard that one and reached back and grabbed the little girl and started dragging her away. And I said, hold on, I'll talk to her. I said, and here's an answer I've given for 30 years and I've never had to go any further with a child. I said, my father's skin is about the same color as mine. And I said, I bet your father's skin is about the same color as yours. End of conversation. And for most children, they're done. Makes sense, right? His dad's skin's like that, so they're done. But mother could not even talk to me even then. So I want you to think about what lesson would a little girl have gotten if she gets drug away without getting to ask her a simple little question and get my simple little answer? What would have been the message to a 4-year-old?
To avoid you.
Avoid people that look like me. Based on what?
Based on the color of your skin.
Based on the perception of race, the color of skin. Would she have noticed that her mom got afraid? And you don't even look at these people, by the way. So you just act like they don't exist. I'm 6'2", I'm 200 pounds, I'm pretty black. I'm not hard to see, especially in a grocery store where the aisles are white and people coming toward me don't have trouble seeing me. But for some reason, mother did not see me. And so this little girl would be afraid. She would pick up on her mother. How long would that lesson last for that little girl?
A lifetime.
A lifetime. So at the university, I'm teaching counseling class. All of my students are white. I asked them that same question. What's the first thing you noticed about me when I came in class today? All the students had a comment, but nobody again said black. And so when we start talking about these issues, I think it's really important that we can be honest about what the real issues are. Let me pull up the PowerPoint and guide the conversation.
Well, I noticed you were black, but I really do like your hat.
Yeah, it's not the noticing, it's the judgment. And so when I go further with especially children and their families, it's the fact that we do notice, but do we make a judgment? And if we make a judgment, that's where the real issue is we make judgments based on those perceptions of people who might appear different than us. I know I had that PowerPoint up, excuse me, guys. Because a lot of the families will say that it's rude to notice, but it's not rude to notice, it's rude to make a judgment based on the noticing. And so I think the lesson, here we go. I found this amazing picture that was just perfect for what I think police officers mean in our communities. And this is how I wanted to introduce my work with you today, was that policemen are really an important part of our community. Did you guys know you got a mission statement? Let me see your hand if you know what the mission statement is of the commission. This is really important because there are mission statements. I've been in organizations where the mission statement is on the wall, and I ask people, what's the mission statement? And they don't know. And it's right here on the wall because we walk by it every day and we don't pay attention to it. It's really important that mission statements are clearly understood and adhered to by an organization because it's the foundation for your success as a commission. Also the goals, people familiar with the goals? I just wanted to emphasize that. But I wanted to start with what it means to be educated. It's from a Greek word that means to lead out of ignorance. How many people are ignorant about something? See hands. All of us, ignorant about something. But once you become educated, you are no longer supposed to be ignorant. Paulo Freire has this amazing quote, there's no such thing as a neutral educational process. He means there's no middle of the road. Education is doing one or two things for you. It's teaching you about the system you live in and how to conform to it, or it teaches you to think critically and creatively and participate, like that last sentence says, in the transformation of the world. I want you to turn the mirror on yourself. What has your education done for you? And this is education in the big picture, not just ABCs, 1, 2, 3s. But what has your education taught you about the system we live in and how to fit in and how to conform to it? Or did you get taught to think critically and creatively, key terms, and participate in transformation of the world? And you can feel free to use the chat, but you also can speak out.
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. I think it's taught us both. My first thought is, feminism and patriarchy. That I studied philosophy in school. And I was introduced to concepts there about, deconstructing toxicity and deconstructing these assumptions. And at the same time, I continue to present myself in specific ways based on how I was raised and how I was taught to behave.
Thank you. And you can put comments, as I said, in the chat, or feel free to speak out, because there's no neutral ground. Your education taught you one of two things. And so when we come to these conversations, we really have to be able to say what we are bringing to these conversations. Other people, conform or transform. What is your education done for you?
I'll go.
Okay, thank you.
I went to some very expensive and wealthy college and graduate school programs that taught me all about conforming and upholding the norms and structures of society.
Yes, thank you. Other people. I mean, this is a critical question. It's really an important question, because if we can't recognize what we have learned, you tend to stay in that rut. You tend to stay in that rut. Ian, go ahead.
Yeah, my grandma maybe had like a 9th grade education. She had difficulty writing and reading, but she knew a lot. She worked in factories, auto part factories, most of her life. But the way that she educated herself and the way that she expressed what she learned and why she learned it was really unique. And although she's no longer with us, I always reflect on how she learned what she learned and how she expressed herself and moved through the world. How she led herself out of ignorance.
My grandma and your grandma up there in grandma heaven, I think, because I would say the same thing about my grandma. The wisest person I've ever known, went to 4th grade. Thank you for that, Ian. Anyone else? One more person and we'll move on for the sake of time. Conform.
I have one.
Transform. Go, Bonnie.
I had one teacher in high school, and he was very interesting, very eccentric, and he essentially told us that we should question everything, even history books. He told us, by the way, nobody's going to teach you this, but apparently Paul Revere wasn't actually the one that did the whole Paul Revere thing. It was some other kid, but it didn't match the poem or whatever. So they just went with Paul Revere. And then he also said other things like, I mean, I felt like they taught us this in school, but he said, nobody's going to teach you that like California was part of Mexico. And essentially we stole that. And just like other things like that. So it just kind of made me question things. It's like, oh yeah, we don't get taught a lot of things in like Native American history. It was like one page and like somehow we're in the United States now or whatever. So I just thought that it was really interesting that he had that idea. And then also in high school, another teacher said to me, he said, it's stupid if you don't ask the question. If you have a question, you are the one that's making yourself stupid. It's like, it's not stupid to ask questions. It's if you're sitting there and asking and wondering, but you don't actually ask it. So just like question everything. So that was my high school education. Thurston High School, not bad.
Right, good educator. Einstein said, never stop questioning. And the best story I've heard is students who told me that their physics teacher jumped out the window of the second floor of the school to teach them a lesson about physics. I said, did he really jump out the window? Yes, he jumped out the window. And so it's really those teachers who cause us to think critically about everything we learn. That's really important. This quote, anybody know Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, founding fathers? These are the boys. How many people know they were racist? They were pretty racist. They thought buying and selling people was okay. They were pretty sexist. They didn't let their mothers vote. How many people want to go tell your mom she can't vote? They didn't let their wives vote. They didn't let their sisters vote. They didn't even make it possible for their daughters to vote. They were very sexist. There were also classes. So if you were a white man, if you were working the potato fields, did they tell you come down and help work on the Declaration of Independence, Constitution? So they were racist, they were sexist, they were classist. How many people know they're dead? That all these guys are dead. They've been dead for hundreds of years. But here we are in 2022 having to navigate around what kind of issues? Racism, sexism, classism, and a few other isms, homophobia, transphobia, all of the things that we are struggling with today. So it must mean that every generation since those men have lived, what have we taught? How to conform to a system or how to transform a system? Do you see how deeply embedded these issues are in our American society? So that the work we're doing now is very similar to the issues that this country began with. The next quote there, Alvin Toffler says, the literate of the 21st century will not be those people who cannot read and write, which we think of literacy typically as reading and writing. But he says it will be those people who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And we're in the 21st century now. Learn, unlearn, relearn. Which one's the hardest?
Relearning.
Relearn?
Unlearn.
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 Unlearned.
Unlearn usually gets about 80% of the votes. Relearn usually gets 15, 20% of the votes. What did everybody overlook?
Learning.
How do you know what you know? You are born a blank slate. You come in this world knowing nothing about race, gender, class, sexual orientation, ability, disability. So where does it come from? Where did we learn these things we hold so tightly? When did you learn you were white? If you are a white person, when did you learn you were white? Did they give you a class? You do this, you do this, you do this. All right, you got it. You can be white. And you went around the rest of your life with that conception of who you are. When do you think they gave me a class? Okay, you want to be black? You can do this, do this, do this. You can be black. No, it happens so naturally that oftentimes, as we just did here, you overlook what you have learned. If you grow up in a racist household, in a racist community, in a racist town, do you walk around every day saying, I'm a racist, I'm a racist, I'm a racist? You don't even imagine you might be a racist until you run in front of those people and you say something to do something and they say, hey, that's racist. What's your first response?
No, it isn't.
No, I'm not. Yes, you are. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. And we end up in that ugly argument. That really, there's no conclusion to that kind of argument. Because either I got to prove you were racist, go get the hood out of your car or something, or you're going to bring your friends of color and have them, advocate for you that you're not racist. And so if we think about what we are attempting to do here, it is understand the society that has produced all of these things and to work to improve it. Think about how these concepts affect you and your organization. I created this for Department of Ed, and a lot of times we had trouble getting past number 1. But if you can't get past number 1, you can't go further. Honesty is really important in this work. Empathy develops from those honest conversations. Empathy is the fuel that we need to be advocates, and advocates is what we need to enact the changes that we need. So as simple as this is, it's really important that we recognize we have to be honest about this work. We have to develop empathy for those people that need help and be willing to be an advocate to produce change. What is DEI? We just defined diversity, but I put equity and equality in here because they tend to be conflated many times, because we will be engaged in equality and consider it to be equity. One of the best definitions of equity came from my work with lawyers. Equity is justice applied without the benefit of a law or a rule. And I didn't put that in here. And I left inclusion empty because I was going to have us do that one as well. Here's 3 definitions of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Take a second and review them. And if there's any questions, and I can send this to you as well, Holly. Anything in this PowerPoint that you guys think might be helpful to you, don't hesitate to point it out. Let Holly know. She'll let me know, and I will send it to you because I put this together just for you guys. Many organizations claim DEI as a principal value, but intent is only the beginning. To implement company-wide DEI strategies and initiatives that support diversity, engage equity, recognize and address biases, and promote inclusivity, recognizing respect and appreciation is not a small job. It constitutes what? This is why this is not easy, because we can talk about this all we want to, but the real DEI work constitutes a cultural change. And I have another whole presentation about culture, because culture is really what we want to be thinking about and how we want to be doing this work. DEI initiatives in the workplace often fail to reach their goals. To be successful, organizations must back up intentions with resources, time, energy, and money to ensure that DEI awareness and work becomes an integral part of organizational ethics, practices, culture, recruitment, and larger business strategy. Alignment with organizational goals and outcomes doesn't happen by accident, but it has to be fostered deliberately from top to bottom with constant leadership support. Wow.
Oh, sorry. Can I ask you a question?
Please go ahead.
Can you go back to the last slide?
Yes.
So how do you, ethics, practices, culture, recruitment, larger business strategy, like the ethics practices and culture, like I keep hearing about how the culture at EPD is like it sounds inclusive and it sounds like they're trying to be diverse and all that, but like, what is it that we're supposed to be looking for? Like when the chief says these things, I'm like, cool, that sounds great. But like, what does it actually look like? What is it that we're supposed to be looking for? Other than like him saying, thank you for saying that, by the way, chief, like diverse and all that kind of stuff. Like, what does it actually look like?
Okay, I am not from here. Remember that?
Yeah.
I am not from here. I come from a place long ways from here. You guys will be kindergartners for a minute? Because I don't know why, but I get invited to a lot of kindergarten classes. Okay. Dr. Lake, you want to come talk to kindergartners? Yeah, and I love it too, because they're some of the best people. So I go into kindergarten, I'm 6'2", they like 1'1". So I have to get on the floor with them. And I get on the floor, and one of the first questions I ask them is, where do you think I'm from? Go, kindergartners, go. Where do you think I'm from?
I mean, if our kindergartner, I'd say Africa.
And they don't even, they say Africa. They can't wait to get it out. Africa. And I got confused. I'm like, Africa, how did you get Africa? And their little wheels started turning. They said, well, because of your skin. I got confused again. I'm like, what about my skin says Africa? I don't see Africa written on me anywhere. I don't have on African clothes. I'm not speaking an African language. I don't have on African headdress. So their little wheels started turning again. They said, because you're Black. I said, what does being Black got to do with Africa? Black people are from Africa. So I want you to think about what has a child been exposed to by kindergarten, so that they can report out just as surely as fact that Black people are from Africa. Do you see how it begins? So I tell them, I'm not from Africa, I'm from Tennessee. It's only like 2,500 miles away from here, about halfway to Africa. But do you think people are different in Tennessee? 2,500 miles away. Yes, they are. And where I grew up, my house was 814 Pruitt Street. Anybody been there besides me? That's my house. You come out of my house, you turn left, you got to the church. The church was so close to our house that you could go to church sitting in our living room, because you could still hear the preacher and the choir and everything else. That's how close the church was to our house. Next door to that was a little store ran by Mr. Jones, a Black man. You could get cookies 2 for a penny. Most of you guys not that old. You get caramel kisses 2 for a penny. You had a quarter, you get in real trouble at this little store. That did on a regular basis. Come out of my house, turn right, you got to my auntie, Vaseline Horton. Anybody know her besides me? That's my auntie, little Black woman, worked in the yard all the time, was the biggest tattletale on the street. She got me more whippings than anybody on the street. She called my mom on the phone one day and said, go in the backyard, look at what your boy is doing. I don't know what I was doing. She got me a whipping. But in the culture I come from, you might not like your auntie, but you respect them. So I'd go by, hey, Vaseline, go right over to my second auntie, Ada Lee Lake. Anybody know her? She was a different auntie. She didn't tell on you. Did something bad at her house, she'd give you a fair warning. Do that again, boy, I'm gonna have to tell your mama. So you quit it, didn't make it home. Plus you made cookies, cakes, and pies all the time. So going to my Aunt Ada Lee's house was always amazing. Next door to her was Miss Brown, 3rd grade teacher at the little school that I went to right across the street, which was a segregated Black school. My relatives, cousins, everybody else lived all the way up that street. People I was familiar with, I could walk into the house without even knocking, and everybody was Black. Let's make me 10. I'm 10 years old. I'm walking up and down Pruitt Street, and I look up and I see Ian. What's my first conclusion without even having to think about it?
He's from somewhere else.
He must be lost. Or he's selling encyclopedias. Or he comes to collect somebody's insurance money. Or he's putting somebody's telephone in. Or he's coming to turn somebody's electricity off. Or he's undercover police. He think we don't know what they look like around here. Guess what they look like? Just like him. Now, remember, I'm 10. I'm 4th grade. How do I know so much about a person I have never met? 2 important lessons I've learned by 10 years old. I know who belongs, but more significantly, what have I learned?
Who doesn't?
Who does not belong. And nobody had to tell me that with their mouth. That's what happens in a monocultural context. Now, if you're taking notes, context is what I'm describing. Everything I'm describing about Pruitt Street is the context that I grew up in, which was a monocultural context where everybody was Black. White person showed up, automatically, they don't belong here, or they must be fitting some of those roles I just gave you. How many people grew up in a monocultural context where most of the people around you kind of look like you, walk like you, talk like you, were like you? Put your hands up, let's see. Is it the majority? Even here in 2022, most of us grew up in a context that was a monocultural context. So how many lenses do you have for the world with a monocultural context? 1. And whose lens is right?
You got
the one I got. My lens. If you disagree with me, I'm sorry for you, you must be wrong. So we left that monocultural context. What happened to that lens? Did you leave it there?
No.
Or did you bring it with you?
Still the first lens you look through.
So you have an already held bias about the way the world is supposed to look, about the way the world is supposed to work. And you bring that with you into a multicultural context. What happens to your little monocultural lens now?
It's got other lenses in front of it.
Starts getting beat up pretty good, because stuff don't look like what you think it should look like. People don't act like what you think they should act like. People don't talk or walk like you think they should. And so this development of a multicultural lens, so you got context, monocultural lens, multicultural lens, if you're making notes. Because when Bonnie is asking what is it that we want for a police department or a fire department or a school system or university system or whatever is a multicultural context that recognizes and supports who?
Multiple lenses.
Just the people who fit the norm? Just the people who fit my lens? So that when my first day in Oregon, my afro was this big, I'm the coolest thing walking. I didn't know where I was coming to, by the way. Friends that said, you want to go to Oregon? I'm like, sure, I'll go to Oregon. It can't be that much different than Tennessee. It's in America, right? You speak English, right? So I hit the ground in Salem, Oregon. I look this way, white people. 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 I didn't see nobody of color. First day, driving between Salem and Kaiser, which is a little suburb where I was staying, police pulled me over. And they said, get out of the car. Where I come from, getting out of the car is when you really get in trouble. You don't get out of the car with the police. You give them your license or you hold your license up and you put your other hand up so they can see it and you keep your behind in the car. And I'm like, why do I need to get out of the car? We said, get out of the car. I said, I'm not getting out of the car. What you want me to get out of the car for? We said, get out of the car. I said, I don't want to get out of the car. They said, you need to get out of the car. So I got out of the car. They said, we're looking for somebody to look like you. I said, I'd like to meet them because I'm looking for somebody to look like me too. I didn't see anybody here. But I'm 19 years old. And I'm feel like I'm an American. I feel like I need to speak up when something's not right. And it's not because I'm Black. It's because I believe that I need to speak up when something's not right. So I made a complaint. The Black people in Salem told me, you're really gonna be in trouble now. And I'm like, why? They really gonna know who you are and they really gonna harass you now. This was my first experience in Oregon. I have raised 3 Black boys. Guess what they experience when they start driving here in Oregon?
Same thing.
Same thing. My oldest son got pulled over 7 times the first year he was driving. And this boy drives like Jesus. I mean, he is a careful driver. And he says, Dad, if they give me a ticket, it would make some sense, but they've never given me a ticket. He said, they take me out of the car. They want to ask me if they can search the car and want to know what I'm doing in this neighborhood. I have 6 Black grandsons. The oldest one has begun driving now. Guess what's happened to him? Same thing. Now we have 3 generations of Black people here in Oregon with the same experiences. But I went with my son to the chief in Salem and complained about what was happening to him. And the chief says, we don't stop people based on their skin color, we stop people based on criminal activity. What did he just say about my son?
He's a criminal.
He's a
Oh,
criminal.
very Black.
My sons are criminals. Are my sons criminals? I'm
No.
like, my sons are not criminals. I raised them. They got more accountability and responsibility to me than they ever gonna have to you. The sergeant standing next to the chief said, well, it's probably not your son's fault. It's the other Black and Latino boys' fault that your son gets stopped.
What?
Yes. So my son might not be a criminal, but every other Black and Latino boy probably is. And so when you ask what we're asking for with this work, I think we're asking for, again, multicultural perspectives of a community so that people get treated fairly, not based on somebody's perception of them. I got to go to Michael Jordan's last game in Portland, me and my son. He worked for Jordan. We're in the Jordan box. I mean, I'm feeling like a big shot. I saw one of my white friends down below in the regular seats. He waved. He says, I'm coming up there. I said, well, if you can figure out how to get up here, come up here. He got up there. I stepped out of the box to talk to him. Here comes 2 security guys. Who do you think they confronted?
You.
Do you have a ticket for being on this level? Did they say anything to my white friend? No. In fact, he said, Johnny, I think you've just been racially profiled.
Jeez.
which embarrassed both of the officers who had just confronted me. And so when we think about what this is, it's that monocultural lens that people come to these conversations with, and their experiences have given them a set of perceptions about the world that causes them to make decisions oftentimes before they have even thought about it. Sometimes this comes out explained as bias, implicit bias. How many people make assumptions? How many people are prejudiced?
Yeah.
How many people are biased?
I try
How
not.
many people, how many people discriminate? We'll always hesitate. All of this is social cognition skills that we have learned over time. And that's what's at play when we meet people who might be different than us. I think I saw your hand, Sean. Go ahead.
Yeah, I had a question sort of bouncing off of Bonnie's of like, it is, and you know, my own experience where I'm told to think critically by education, by people in power. We are told, oh, well, we're not going to, you know, we're not going to racially profile, you know, we don't think that your sons are criminals. But the words that people say are performative, right? They're not always true. So like going off Bonnie's question, like how do we, I guess part of our job, right, is to, or even more so the citizens accountability board, forgot the name for a second, but is to tell the difference between what's performative and what's genuine. And that's not, you know, I wish you had all the answers. I don't expect you to have them all, but if you got insight, I'd love it.
Not easy. Let me make you guys uncomfortable. How many people in this conversation believe you're racist? Let me see hands. Put them up high. You are racist. Put them up high. We got 1, 2. I did this in California first. I'll give you guys, I feel like you guys are my community, so I don't feel like I'm doing a session. I hope that's all right with you guys, because I live here. And these are conversations that once we begin this, I hope you recognize that we should continue these conversations. This is not CPR training. You know, I'm not going to give you a little card that says you are CPR qualified or you are diverse DEI qualified. But this this work is really, really important that we do the real work. And so the example, I had 300 people in California, and I asked, how many people are racist in here? Only like 2 or 3 hands went up. Everybody else tightened up. One guy said, I think I am, I'm trying not to be. Next guy said, well, tell me what is your definition of racism before I answer that question, because I need to know. I says, okay, let's ask this question a little bit differently. How many people in this group have never had a racist thought in your life? Let me see your hand, get it up really high. You've never had a racist thought. You've never made a racist comment. You've never told a racist joke. You never committed any kind of racist action. In fact, you are perfectly innocent. Get your hands up high. How many people in that audience? 300 people raise their hand. Nobody. Nobody. So none of us are perfectly innocent. I said, so let's think about this a little bit differently. How many people hate everybody who don't look like you? You hate every other human being who don't look like you. Nobody raised a hand. I said, so let's think of it instead of a binary where you either racist or you're not racist, which only gives you 2 choices, right? If you commit an action, we got to define it. It's going to be racist or not racist. Is that enough room for human beings? This is the binary trap. They call it the binary trap in American society. You're either good or you're what? Bad. You're either right or you're wrong. You're either male or you're female. You're either white or you're black. Instead, think of a continuum. 0 over here, 100 over here. You can find the most racist person you know, and they always got a story about one of those people that they got along with. So if we can all admit that we are somewhere on this continuum, You may be a really, really good person, but I guarantee you're not sitting on zero.
I have to say I have my hand raised because I don't have the power structure behind me to say that I'm racist. I can't say I have prejudice. I can't say I have bias, but I don't have that power structure to support my bias or my prejudice.
Well, that's the difficulty with discrimination, is it's always associated with power. And what you're talking about, Silver, is the structural institutional nature of racism. You know, and white supremacy in our context is probably a more accurate term, white supremacy in American context. But the structural institutional power that allows individuals to enjoy the privilege of race, which whiteness in our case, is a structural piece. People of color don't have access to that, typically because of their race, but institutionally, people of color do have access to institutional power. Look at our universities. Who's in the positions of diversity and equity people in our institutions? Is it a white person?
If they lie about their race sometimes.
Yeah, but typically those institutions know exactly what they're doing when they put people of color in those positions. And does that person of color know what their responsibility is to the institution? Is it to challenge the institution and change it, or is it to protect the institution?
Plausible deniability.
Yeah. And then I've been in this situation personally where I have to go into court, and who's the person on the other side of the argument when I say that I was treated with a racist behavior? Who do they bring into the courtroom to defend themselves with?
Person of color.
A person of color who knows their responsibility to the institution, and they fulfill it by sitting there. And then they'll tell me personally later, I was worried about my job, because I've asked them, why did you lie on the stand? I got a good position now. That's what the person said. And so this structural part of it is really important. But stay with this example, because it's really important, because if we can locate ourselves on this continuum, how many of us have work to do? So Holly, I think I told you early on that I'm not sexist. Didn't I tell you that?
Yes.
I'm not sexist. I'm not sexist. And Bonnie, you know that I'm not sexist too, right?
No, I don't know you.
Know that I'm sexist. I'm not sexist. Well, I need you to know I'm not sexist. And Julie, I'm not sexist. What are you beginning to wonder about me about now?
How sexist you are.
How sexist is this guy? Because he's got a problem with it. So when a white person walks up to me and the first thing they got to say is I'm not racist, guess what goes through my mind? Ding! What's going on? Why is this person saying they're not racist? So instead of that denying it and suggesting that any of us are innocent, to one extent or the other, we've all been affected by an incredibly racialized, genderized, sexualized society. I mean, unless you've grown up in a cave. Anybody grew up in a cave? It goes to the media, the newspapers. Let me give you an example, a real easy one. I'm gonna name a character. Tell me what color person you see. NBA basketball player. How many people see a black person? Quick.
Michael Jordan.
How many people don't see a black person? Immigrant. How many people see a person of color? How many people don't? And this one is interesting because when I was back on the East Coast, I did this example and people said immigrants are all colors. Because context-wise, we have immigrants here on the East Coast, on the West Coast, that's Latino and Asian most. On the East Coast, they got a lot of immigrants whose skin is white. And so it caught me by surprise the first time it happened, but it's really a good lesson that context first defines your worldview and then context controls your worldview. And so when we think of systemic issues, which is where Silver was going, you could throw everybody out of a typical school, get rid of the teachers, administrators, the counselors, everybody else, and replace them with people who went to the same schools that they came from. At 8 o'clock tomorrow, would you have a different institution? Or would it be very much the same? And so this is what I think for Chief and for other people who are trying to navigate institutional frameworks is the institution has a certain life of its own that tends to control individuals within that institutional framework unless we do what? Change the institutional framework. So you got a big red machine and it's got one button on the front. It says Coke across the top and it's got one button. When you hit that button, what do you expect to get at the bottom?
Coca-Cola.
Institution did exactly what it was supposed to do. But we decide we want to change the institution. How will you change that institution? Typically they'll hire somebody who's an expert. Like we hire a PhD to come in and push the button. I don't care how they push the button. They can push it with left hand, right hand, with foot or whatever. If they're pushing the same button, what product are you gonna get at the bottom? Still gonna get a Coke. So don't hire a person of color and bring them inside your institution and think that that single individual is gonna change the outcome of that institution. They will not be able to. Typically, they will get exhausted and leave. So if we're gonna change the institutional outcomes, we have to change the machinery. And so, like some people say, well, I slip in on Friday night and put some 7-Up and some Sprite in there and didn't nobody realize it. And when they push the button, oh, hey, wait a minute, how did we get this? How many people have been subversive trying to change institutional outcomes? Working around structure. Many of us have, trying to change institutional outcomes. So until we change the machine, your outcomes will likely be the same. Any other questions?
You have an example of where you've seen that transformative change in an institution?
Yes, I've worked with a law firm in Portland with 90 attorneys, 90. And this is the 5th year that they are contracting to work on their DEI work. They've changed the, what do they call it? Sabbatical. They changed all of that so that everybody in their organization now gets a sabbatical. It might not be as much as the big guys, but it is equivalent to what that person has done with the organization. Also, their bonus system, they changed their bonus system. They have promoted the few people of color that they have into positions of being paralegals and supporting them. I have a commitment from them that if there are young people of color who have finished their first year in law school, they will hire that person to work in their law firm and help them to finish their degree. So they're pushing on structural stuff. And I worked with Salem Police on some of their recruitment issues. And it's really difficult in systems like the police departments. The HR person for the police in Salem showed me the list. He says, I got 22 candidates here. He says, number 21 and 22 are the first people I will get to that are people of color. And he says, if I choose to give them an opportunity before I give the other 20 ahead of them, I'll have 20 lawsuits. And so the union kind of conversation also has to be had at the same time as trying to diversify institution, especially like the police. Fire departments, I've worked with them as well, have some of that same structure. The fire department is an interesting one because of the history of exclusion that they have practiced. Some of it's race, gender, but even height was part of their requirements a while ago. With the law firm, the leaders took initiative and we created a special group that actually works on these issues and meets every couple of weeks and talk about how they are moving forward. That's probably the one I would brag about. There's an organization in California that I work with too, and it's all been online. We've never been in the same room, but they were kind of embarrassed, I think, because they had a promotion and the people of color came to me and says, I just watched a bunch of white people promote a bunch of white people. And so I asked, how do people get promoted here? And how do people get raises? And they had no structure for how this was done. So how was it that you ended up with all white people getting promoted by other white people? Because somebody knew how to do it. And so it just exposed that big old hole in that whole organization. I mean, this is $1 million organization too. That there was this internal kind of way that people helped other people to get promoted, and the people of color were left outside of that conversation.
You know, one of the things that kind of resonated with me when you started the conversation, especially when you're talking about your neighborhood and when you saw, you know, the Ian Winbrocks of the world walking down your street, and you notice that, you know, they don't, wait a minute, that guy doesn't belong here. That kid doesn't belong here.
Yes.
Is that we get really, really enamored. And I'll just speak from my profession, which I'm finishing my 32nd year, and this is what I've known for 32 years. We get really, really enamored with metrics as somehow defining whether or not we're making progress. And certainly metrics are important in our world. I mean, crime stats, you know, I mean, everything, seems to have a metric. And we talked before you came on, Dr. Lake, about our most recent recruitment and the excitement around kind of the candidate pool that we're starting to see right now, which I think is really, really hopeful. But the piece that resonated for me was, when was the last time either I as a leader or people in our community as the overwatch and the accountability mechanism for us asked the question of our people internally to the police department if they feel like they belong? Are you in an organization where you feel like you belong? Navasha Tester, do you feel like you belong? Yes. And because I think when people feel like they belong in that organization, in their home, in their professional home,
yes, sir,
I think that they are better positioned to help people that they serve feel like they belong. Yes. But we oftentimes don't ask that question internally. We spend a lot of time around accountability and holding people accountable around things that are externally facing, and we don't ask that really tough question internally.
Thank you, Chief.
Yes. Here's one of the examples I use with the attorneys. And I said, you recruit an attorney like me from Tennessee. I was one of the best graduates from my school, and you want me to come to Portland, Oregon to work. Now, 90 lawyers in the room. And this goes back, Chief, to when I first came on. I heard you talking about recruitment, and I put a note in the chat. I think I only sent it to Holly, but we should never talk about recruitment without talking about retention, because they go together. Anytime we mention recruitment, retention has to be part of that conversation. And retention is a soft set of skills. It goes to what you were just saying, Chief. How well do I feel like I belong here? And so with the lawyers in Portland, I said, okay, I just came to Portland. I ain't never been here before. I said, somebody tell me, where can I get a haircut? Nobody moved. I said, somebody tell me, where can I get good Southern food? My grandma could cook, my mama could cook. I love good Southern food. Where can I go eat? Nobody said anything. I says, where can I find a church that's got a really good preacher who knows how to preach and got a choir that really sings, you know, it's got the spirit in the church. Somebody tell me, where can I go to church? Nobody moved. I says, where can I get an apartment that when I have insomnia, you know, I want to take a little walk around the block at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, that I won't scare the shit out of all of my neighbors and they call the police on me. Somebody help me out. Where can I live? Nobody said anything. I said, so how long you think I'm gonna stay here if the only thing I have is a job and a paycheck? I don't have a life. And that's that retention piece. If we can't help that person who comes to our community feel like they actually belong here, and they can be connected to a larger community, and it don't have to be people who look like you, because I'm from Tennessee and I have connections with all kinds of community all over this state that has made me feel like I am welcome here. And so that sense of belonging, Maya Angelou says, the ache for home lives in all of us, the safe place where we can go as we are and not be questioned. I mean, you hear home in that little quote, the safe place where we can go as we are and not be questioned. And so from a monocultural context, I think it's one of our liabilities of our communities that we don't often talk about. Homogeneous contexts, and this goes back to Ian's early comments, homogeneous contexts are not healthy. I don't care who you are. Raising a child in an all-Black community and then sending them out into the big world is not a good thing for that child. Raising a child in an all-white community, which we got a lot of children here who are being raised in an all-white community just by nature of our history, is not good for them. I had one student in Salem, young white kid, really, really smart, went to U of O. Did he have a diverse experience at U of O? Nope. Got a job with a major company in LA, computer. He was a computer whiz. I mean, he was smart as hell, computer whiz. Went to California. He was the only white person in the company. First time in his life. He only lasted like half a year and ended up coming back here. So Nikki Giovanni says, if we raise our children in an homogenous setting, we handicap our own children because they will not live in an homogenous world. And so what we're pushing for is to move forward as a community. And I think the diversity is our advantage if we can capitalize on it. That is the real challenge. Can we bring these pieces together and work together to address the ugly issues of racism, sexism, classism, all of those things? But those overt things are easier to address than the more subtle. I have a PhD. I had a PhD for 12 years now. I have a principal license. I had a principal license for 20 years. I applied for an assistant principal job. The students talked me into it. I said, yeah, I'll step away from being a professor. I don't love being in the university anyway. I work with kids. And they hired a man who did not even have a principal's licensure yet, much less a PhD, over me. And their question to me in the interview was, you're gonna be working with 2 white females. How do you feel about that? Those are the kind of subtleties, I think, that nobody would say that's overt racism, but it actually denies opportunities to people who don't fit what they are expecting.
Dr. Lake, we have Commissioner.
Can I just make a final comment and then I'll shut up, Silver, just because I started this, you know, I know Ian's got his hand up.
No problem.
You know, one of the things that I often think about when I think about recruitment, Dr. Lake, is I hear an awful lot about this is an us issue, being a police department. You know, it's your job to recruit a diverse candidate pool. And it's occurred to me that this community can help me do my job better.
Yes.
You know, it resonates with me when you had the questions of the lawyer group, you know, where can I get a haircut? Where can I get some food? Where can I go to church? If we don't have those things already figured out as a community, then my job of trying to recruit a family of color, it's not just about the police officer, it's about the family that comes with them.
Yes.
If I can't recruit a family of color without a community being able to provide things that look familiar and help them feel like they belong, it makes it really, really hard.
Yes. I don't know if you have a cadet program or anything like that, but that was one of the things we started doing in Salem that was really helpful because it changed those relationships between the police. In fact, I had an after-school basketball that I used to invite officers to, and there were officers who would come and play ball. And then when the police car would be driving through the neighborhood, all the little basketball players would be trying to see if it was their officer. If it was their officer, they'd run up to the car and talk to him through the window and everything like they was all buddies. But if it wasn't, they just keep walking. And so bridging those differences, and I have kids, sometimes I think it was middle school, kids who wanted to be policemen at middle school. But by the time they're in high school, because they've had negative experiences with policemen, they don't want to be policemen anymore. So I would say growing our own is part of what your strategy should be too, is capturing those young people when they are still interested in learning about policing and maybe becoming a police officer. Thank you for that. There was another question. Thank you guys for the question. This is
So let's begin with the question and answer period because we've got about 10 more minutes and we can finalize this piece. I did see Commissioner Winbrock's hand up, so let's start with him.
Yeah, what a great conversation. And thanks so much, Chief Tu, for the questions. I've really been reflecting, you know, from Chief's perspective, he's coming as like an executive of the organization. And then I'm really glad you put our mission statement up, because I've been reflecting like, well, what's my role as a police commissioner, right? And you gave a great example of a private institution. And I feel like in some ways, because private organizations are so transactional, right? They have a profit motive in having diversity, equity, and inclusion be paramount, because they can poach the best people. Imagine those organizations that are not doing that. Well, then I'm going to retain the best talent, right? Because not everyone looks the same. And so I'm wondering, for us, knowing that, you know, our mission is to facilitate communication between the community and police, public understanding of policy, providing input, and reflecting values, like what advice do you have for us as commissioners to create like systemic change? You know, a lot of times when we look at policy, we're changing words, pronouns, sentences, and it doesn't feel transformational. You know, it feels like we're doing the work that's asked of us. But I'm wondering if you have any ideas around how, as commissioners, we might be better able to kind of align ourselves with that type of systems change, knowing that we need to follow that mission that the city has asked of us.
I would say first, do your own work. That's something I have started saying to a lot of people inside the systems. You have to first do your own work before you're going to be able to effectively do this work with other people. And you can't do it alone. Now, no one person can facilitate institutional change. So relationships are really, really important, because you can only do this hard work when there is a relationship. With no relationship, we don't talk honestly. We don't tell each other the truth. We say what we think we need to say. That other person says what they think they need to say. So here's one of the things I ask people. Can you name 3 places where you have legitimate, meaningful, and authentic interactions with another culture different than your own? 3 places where you have legitimate, meaningful, and authentic interactions with another culture different than your own. Don't be discouraged, because I hadn't met a group yet where anybody could name 3. Michael?
Oh, now you have me doubting myself.
No, go ahead. I mean, this is an exercise, so there's no judgment about it. It's just really, it's really revealing when we realize that we don't have legitimate, meaningful, and authentic interactions with other cultures different than our own. We tend to gravitate where?
Where it feels safe.
Where we feel safe, where the people are kind of like us. They kind of talk like us. They kind of walk like us. They kind of are like us. So then usually with crowd, again, like I told you guys, this is not a training as far as I'm concerned. I feel like I'm talking to my community. So I'm moving around a little bit, but I'll go down to 2. I'll ask the audience, how many people can name 2? Don't nobody move. How many people can name 1? Go ahead. I see Navasha and Michael. Let's try it out. Go, Navasha, you first up.
So the police department in general, I would define it as a different culture other than my own. So I do think I do have those connections. And then I work in a school, so I'm also exposed to a bunch of different cultures through my work, unfortunately. But at the same time, I think it is very different in my position as a YSO versus, you know, a traditional patrol officer.
Okay. What do you do at work?
I'm a youth services officer for the Bethel School District. So I'm a patrol. I was patrol, and now I'm in the schools.
Okay. And for everybody else here, ask the same question. What do you do at work that constitutes legitimate, meaningful, and authentic cultural interaction?
So I would say the classroom, because I'm an ethnic studies professor. So it's kind of what I do. And for the second one, I would say a recovery meeting.
Recovery meeting. Okay. Yeah, both of those would be different than the everyday, because at our work, we go to work, you do your chores, a job of your work, you maybe have coffee with somebody, maybe go to lunch with somebody, you finish your work and you go home. Does that constitute deep cultural interaction?
I think it depends on what job you have. Like for me, I have a different mission within the department to fulfill this new role that we have in the community. So it's really focused on getting those community interactions, learning. It's a two-way street of learning. So not only can kids potentially learn from me, I'm learning a lot from them. I've really realized that in the past 2 months that I've been there. So for me, I do feel like I am making those genuine connections only because I see myself as something other than just a police officer.
Okay, so you need to locate that outside of the department then, because what you said first was inside the department. That the department culture is different than yours. But I would say those relationships you're building outside are probably more legitimate as authentic, meaningful cultural interactions with those cultures. What do you think?
I would politely disagree, only because I do carry a lot of the stuff home. I am very connected to my community to begin with, just as far as community service and having that outside of work. So that is something that I focus on as far as not just being a police officer. I am Naivasha Tester. I was formerly Naivasha Smith. I'm a proud Black female, and I love to actually have that connection, that genuine connection outside of work. It's just nice because I do have the work component to kind of string it together initially.
Okay, so I'm kind of pushing on this because of Chief's comments earlier. And do you have those interactions inside the department?
Internally, it's a different culture.
Well,
yes, I have few folks that I would say that I have genuine connections with.
Yes, that's what I was pushing on, because I really, really appreciate what you're doing outside, because that's so significant for our communities here. And it's not just for officers of color. I think, Chief, you should have your white officers understand that it's not a facility of skin color to build these kind of relationships with communities. For the white people in this audience, this is how it comes across. Counselor Allen, you're different than those other white people I know. Now, that don't sound like a compliment, does it? But it means that you have given that person an experience with you that's different than the typical experience they have with other white people. You have showed up as a person, maybe more so than other white people, and it comes across like that in that comment. You know, you're different than other people. It means they see you. That stereotype may be 100%, but now it's 90, and there's one little picture in that little box over here, and it's you. That means that person probably still has those majority stereotypes that they hold about the larger community, but because of their experiences with you, guess what? It has moved. And this is how stereotypes change anyway. They don't change as a sea change. They don't go from stereotype to no stereotype. They change incrementally based on our experiences with people from that group that we hold a stereotype about. And that's significant, especially for a community like ours, where we have access to these communities. We have small communities here, but they are vital communities that we can have interactions with. And I think the more we get ourselves out there to have these interactions, the more we learn how to get past these stereotypes, biases, and seeing people differently than we see ourselves.
Commissioner Shivers.
Yeah, I just wanted to take the opportunity. Thank you so much for coming in and talking with us, Dr. Lake. Just before you joined us, we were talking about retention and peer support group. You said something that really struck home with me, that the people who have the answers to the questions, where can I get a haircut? Where can I eat, good food? It don't have to be people of the same culture. But I wanted to highlight that nonetheless, because it supported sort of more what I was going for in the retention conversation.
I am fortunate. I come from Tennessee, Black people and white people, and there's a line down the middle of those communities because segregation was the norm. I saw the sign said white only. My mother used to buy gas at the gas station and they could not use the bathroom because the bathroom was only for white people. That's where I came from. I am not supposed to be as competent in Oregon as I am, but it's what has happened for me over time. And so I tell people, I live in Oregon. I work in school districts. I don't get to work with a lot of Black people. So who am I working with most of the time? When I go to Roseburg, who's in the room? No Black kids at all white kids. And yet I have made relationships in places like Roseburg. I'm adopted into 2 Native tribes. I got grandma in Grand Round. Hallie Ford, the Ford family in Roseburg. She was like my grandma. I told a story about my grandma. She says, you got another grandma. And she funded my education at Willamette University, which I couldn't afford because I was a single parent. And they did a book about the Ford family, and they called me and they said, you need to come for the release of the book. I'm like, why? They said, just be here. I went down, they put out a book about the Ford family. Guess who's in the book with the Ford family in Roseburg? Me and Hallie Ford hugged up in the book. And so the possibilities, we have to believe in the possibilities of doing this. If you don't believe in the possibilities of doing it, you're going to undermine your own self. You're going to let those stereotypes or those already held beliefs in the back of your mind control what you think and what you are able to do. Anybody know what Bandon is? Not a lot of Black people in Bandon. And I drove 101 just to come up to 101. And I drove through Bandon. I saw this sign says, barbecue, we cure vegetarians. I said, that's a crazy person. I'm gonna have to see who's in there. So I made the block, went in, this big old white guy wearing overalls with the barbecue pit halfway in and out of the building cooking barbecue. And I says, man, I saw your sign out there. I says, is it any good? Your barbecue any good? He says, man, I'm from Alabama. He says, yes, barbecue is good. I said, what's good today? He said, the brisket came out perfect. I says, how do you serve it then? He says, I can make you a couple of brisket tacos. I said, cool. He says, you sound like you got a Southern accent too. I said, yeah, I'm from Tennessee. And the third guy came out the back, who's the owner. He said, I heard y'all talking. He says, you a Southerner? I said, yeah, I'm a Southerner. I'm from Tennessee. He said, well, I'm from Arkansas. He said, I didn't know anything about Black people till they integrated me in the Black school with all the Black kids. And he said, we was fighting the first week, but then we became friends. Guess what my experience was? They integrated me into a white school and we was fighting until we became friends. So I sat down and the owner came over. He says, do you mind if I sit with you? I'm like, sure, if you want to. He sat down. He says, and we talked a little bit. He says, do you like biscuits? I says, man, I love biscuits. But I say, ain't nobody in Oregon can make no biscuits. He said, my wife can make biscuits. He said, in fact, I got some in the back. Do you want a biscuit? I said, yeah. He goes in the back, comes out with a biscuit with butter and jam and put it on the table. I said, man, you say you're a Southerner? I said, you know, you don't eat biscuits out molasses? He said, I got some in the back. Do you want molasses? He went in the back and got molasses. Now get this picture. Here's this Black man that we ain't never met. We sitting at the table eating biscuit tacos and biscuits. He had such a good time talking to me. He called his wife on the phone right there. He says, honey, you got to talk to this man. He put me on the phone with his wife. And when I got home, she had sent me an email. She says, my husband enjoyed your visit so much. She says, I hope you come back and eat with us again. Possibilities. You know, if I'd gone in there saying all these some ugly, white, racist Southerners, I can tell by the way they talk, I would have never had that experience with them. And so I think if we look at our community, we have a rich community here. I mean, I think it's unfortunate that we don't talk to each other more. I have an adopted father here in Oregon. He told me, he said, boy, if you stood next to a telephone pole long enough, he said, I believe you would talk to it. Because I talk to everybody. And it's one of the things I think that gives me some of that access. I got crazy story, guys, about Oregon. Anybody been to Scotts Mills? Scotts Mills is back of Silverton, about 7 miles the other side of Silverton. And I used to do FedEx out there. It's a little bitty small community. It used to be 20,000 people out there when the mills were running, but there's about 200 people in the little town now. And they have a breakfast once a week as a fundraiser for Scotts Mills. And I started going out there and taking my sons out there, those 3 Black boys I was telling you about, plus their little friends. And the first day we went out there, people would come in, good morning, everybody. And they would just stop and stare. But my boys grew up going to Scotts Mills. Those people said, y'all should buy some land and move out here. They asked me about my sons. And my daughter, she was in Arizona, and she said, she called me on the phone one day and she was cracking up. She says, Daddy, I was trying to explain to these people down here how you used to take us way out in the country and eat breakfast with midgets, because these were small people. And there were 4 or 5 generations of them who were there. some of the grandfathers wore overalls. They were about the same size as my sons. You should have saw my sons when they first saw them, because they probably wanted to pull on their beards and stuff. But my sons and daughter grew up with normal interactions with people who other people would think would not be welcoming or friendly in a place like Scotts Mills. And so my sons, who are adults now and got children, they want to take their children out to Scotts Mills to meet these people that they grew up with. So a lot of possibilities.
Thank you so much for your time with us, Dr. Lake. I don't know how else to say it. I feel like there's a wealth of knowledge that we have all experienced from your conversation with us. And I would want to thank you again for being able to spend this time with us and coming out and sharing some of that, some of your experiences and some of your knowledge.
Yeah, you are very, very, very welcome. Oh, there was one role play I want to leave you guys with. It's not a role play because it actually happened. I was doing a training in one of our counties here in Oregon, and several people of color showed up and they started talking about racial profiling, and there were police officers there as well. And one young police officer especially got kind of agitated, and he finally raised his hand. He says, I don't like all this talk about racial profiling. I've worked in this department for 5 years, and I've never seen any racial profiling in this department. Before I could respond to him, a small Latina woman raised her hand. She says, I don't know what you're talking about. She says, I've been here for 15 years and there's racism everywhere in this department. Who was telling the truth?
Both
of them.
He hadn't seen it.
How is that possible? There's racism at the same time as there's no racism?
He's not experiencing it.
He's not experiencing it. And so navigating that, I want you to think about that. Take that with you and think about how do you navigate that? Because if that woman files a complaint after 15 years of saying nothing, what is the organization likely to say? Is she gonna have a lot of currency?
Why didn't you speak up sooner?
Why didn't you speak up sooner? And for the white officer, if he's called to ask about racism in the department, whose voice is going to have more weight, his voice or the Latina woman? Do you see why this is difficult? But these conversations are what I think will be productive for us to recognize that there can be two experiences in the same space at the same time that can be very, very different. But I appreciate the time with you all. And since we've had this conversation, like one of my storytelling sessions, at the end of the storytelling, I said, once you share a story, you will never be strangers again. So Holly, you can feel free to distribute my contact information to people. And I will be glad to share the PowerPoint that I prepared for tonight if you guys want it. And any questions or continuing parts of this conversation. This is my community. Like I said, I got 6 Black grandsons. I have a deep investment. I got 3 granddaughters too. I wasn't meaning to overlook them because they are powerful young women as well. But our work to improve this community should accrue to all of us and to our children who will follow us. So thank you all.
Thank you again, Dr. Lake.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lake.
All right. Thank you all.
So my apologies that we are a little bit over time, but I did want to give a little bit of opportunity to kind of introduce Scott Lemons. Am I pronouncing the name correctly? Lemons?
Yep, you are. Lemons.
Wonderful.
Like fruit, but plural.
Yeah, let's go ahead and give you a few minutes and then we'll finish up with closing comments.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Vice Chair. So yeah, I moved to Eugene about 12 to 13 years ago. Time is a little wishy-washy for me. But I came from a military town on the southern border. So, and Dr. Lake hit, and he's a hard person to follow, honestly, but gosh, so yeah, I mean, living next to the border, living on a military fort, which is what I can think of in my head as the most integrated, it provided me so many different perspectives. but I had to leave for many different reasons. So I came here and was the best choice of my life. I graduated the University of Oregon in 2019 with a major in psychology and a minor in public policy planning and management. I ended up staying here. I thought I was going to go to Portland, but I ended up staying here because I love this place. And honestly, because I care deeply about this community and I want to help not just people in general, although that is my job and that is what I went to college for, but I do want to affect systems in this community as well. And ever since graduation, I started working for Lane Independent Living Alliance, downtown Eugene. And I am now a program coordinator for the Peer Support Club, which is a mental health drop-in center, also downtown Eugene. I'm on several community boards, and chief among them being the Human Rights Commission, and that's why I'm here today as your liaison. But I'm also on Eugene's equity panel. I'm on Peace Health's Client Voices Advocate panel, and I'm on the Cahoots Stewardship Council, which is more focused on the long-term sustainability of Cahoots and not their short-term practices. And I am very happy, so happy to be here. Been through the School of Hard Knocks and been through the School of U of O, and I think this is destiny, honestly. And I am open to any questions that you all might have.
Well, we appreciate you joining us, and look forward to further working with you. I understand you're doing work with Sunrise Movement as well. Is that correct?
Yes. So Sunrise Movement is a youth organization. So I aged out of Sunrise Movement about 6 months ago. But yes, I was the co-founder of Sunrise Eugene and was able to attend many protests. And the environment is a very big part of why I'm here today and why I'm still living and still fighting.
Thank you so much, Scott. Any other questions or comments? So before Dr. Lake does go, I want to offer him up a quick round of applause. Thank you so much, Dr. Lake. Me and Johnny worked together in the past, and it's like, I'm always excited to see him. Yeah, let's do that. I'm always excited to see him, to talk with him, to work with him, and we got to catch up as soon as COVID's over, man. It'd be great. All right, well, we're going to move on to our closing comments, and we have about 12 minutes for that. So let's go ahead and start with, where did we start? I'm going to start with Counselor Ye. You have any closing comments?
Yeah, I feel like it's really hard to think right now because there's a lot, just all of the things we've just talked about. I'm wondering if we're going to have an opportunity to debrief and talk about this among ourselves after we've had time to kind of let it all sink in, or no. Anyways, I guess that nobody has to answer that. That's just what I'm thinking is I'm not really ready to talk about it yet, but I hope that we'll get an opportunity to maybe talk about it amongst ourselves at some point.
Lemon meringue pie and coffee at your place tonight, Johnny?
Yeah, of course.
Even better. Yeah. That's all I have. Right. Thanks so much.
Let's say goodbye to Counselor Hames Garcia. Looks like he's already off, so he needed to jump off. But let's move on to Counselor Zelenka.
Yeah, a lot to digest. Thank you, Dr. Lake. You got a lot of style going on, but you also had a lot of substance and ways of framing stuff that makes you think about it in a different way, which is really what you're trying to do, and very successful at it. So I think I have to sit with some of that stuff for a while and let it sink in. But thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. And let's move on to Commissioner Dominguez.
Thank you, Johnny. That was great. I will probably email you with follow-up questions. And that's it. Thanks.
Wonderful. Commissioner Winbrook.
Yeah, just a second. Counselor Ye, I loved the session we had tonight. Thank you so much, Dr. Lake. I think I'm going to need to percolate a little bit on what you said, and my girlfriend Emma would definitely agree. I could also talk to a telephone pole if I was around it long enough. So I feel like you and I have more in common than just our grandmas. I wanted to offer to Holly and to you, Vice Chair, any assistance you need with a hybrid meeting. I'm committing right now to be at our next Police Commission meeting in person, but I know from firsthand experience how difficult hybrid meetings can be. It's sometimes the worst of both worlds. Sometimes you're excluding the folks in person because you're deferring too much to the virtual folks, and people might want to feel more comfortable doing public comment in person and coming in person, or they might feel more comfortable coming online. And Bonnie, I see your eyebrows furrowing a little bit. And so what I was actually talking about was folks who want to be able to provide public comment, who are members of the public. I find with our own meetings that sometimes people have barriers to technology access and degrees of comfort with technology. And so showing up in person is just what they do to make them feel more comfortable. So yeah, we haven't cracked the nut of how to do the perfect hybrid meeting, but we've made lots of mistakes. So if you want to hear all the mistakes that we've made in hopes of not replicating them, would happily share those with you, because I know how difficult it's been for us trying to pull off a great hybrid meeting. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Winbrock. Let's go ahead and move on to Commissioner Shivers.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Dr. Lake. Last time I had a chance to interact with you, it was a much bigger group, so we didn't get to interact as much. So I really look forward to taking these lessons, talking with all my fellow commissioners, and talking to you more.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Shivers. Let's go ahead and go to our new commissioner, Commissioner Lemons.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Yeah, first of all, thank you so much, Dr. Lake. That was incredible, and I have a lot to ponder, and I would very much like this commission to continue this conversation going forward. And I can't wait to figure out how to audit your class, because I will be there. And then just thank you all, everyone, for the warm welcome to the commission.
Thank you, Commissioner Lemons. Julie, Sergeant Smith, do you have anything you'd like to add? If you did, you would be unmuted, but doesn't look like you did.
I'm sorry about that. I was
That's
trying to figure out how to find the mute button. No, I really enjoyed the presentation. I enjoyed being involved in the conversation. It did bring me some thoughts about, this is my 31st year in law enforcement. And the question, nobody's ever asked me, do I have ever, if I felt included? And so I was sitting here pondering what my answer would be. And I guess my sharing of that would be for another time.
I will definitely present you with an opportunity to do that in the future if we ever have me chair again. But thank you so much for the thought. Let's go ahead and move on to Officer Tester. Ivasha, you have anything you'd like to share?
I do. Sorry,
Wonderful.
She's having some issues tonight, so I had to hold her in mama's hands, I guess. But I do want to say thank you, Dr. Lake. I really appreciate you coming. Some very eye-opening things that I think we could all learn. I am just speaking as just an officer, but I think it'd be awesome to have you in the PD and actually come and talk to folks. I was hoping Chief Skinner was still going to be on, but I see Sergeant Smith is, but I definitely share the same sentiment as Sergeant Smith, is that question of, do you feel like you belong? I've only been in the department 6 years, but I haven't been asked that. And, when you had asked it, it made me do the same thing that Sergeant Smith was talking about as far as sitting and actually questioning that. So thank you again. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you for your comments and for your thoughts. Let's go ahead and finish with Commissioner Davis.
Hello, everyone. It was good to see everyone. Dr. Lake, thank you for being here. I really appreciate, and I always enjoy hearing all of your stories and all of your lessons. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Good to see you, Maze.
And I will finish out by saying, not only is my head full, but my heart is full. Thank you so much, Johnny, and for coming out and being a part of this with us. I'm going to call it at that unless there's any final things. Let's all look forward to the April meeting. Thank you all so much for being here for this evening, and I hope you have a good month.
Thanks for running the meeting.
Yeah, you're welcome. See y'all.
Bye, everyone.
Good job, Silver.
Thanks.